Thanks, gentlelady. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank each of you for being here. This is extremely important, and this is something I'm very concerned with, and that is EPA and other agencies promulgating rules and essentially doing the work of what is supposed to be Congress and the elected officials. And then what we're going to find here is that this is going to send negative signals to the entire power industry. To invest in baseload in baseload generation, and that's not what we need. You know, I'm still stinging from the State of the Union address when the President of the United States, in the same breath, blamed the high price of gasoline on the fact that the fossil fuel industry was not investing in the infrastructure, and then in the next breath said, "Oh, we're not going to need fossil fuels the next 10 years anyway." Duh. I mean. This is serious stuff here, and I'm very concerned about this. We're putting every rule imaginable into the way of the most reliable power generating sources that we have. 60% of this nation's energy comes from natural gas and coal. And here's the EPA putting these rules and regulations in the way of this. And it's just, when you talk about carbon capture technology, it's just not economical yet. Do we want to get there? Yeah, we want to get there, but we're not there yet, and that is the problem. I had the opportunity to travel with the conservative conference, the Conservative Climate Caucus, to Europe, and what we recognized there and what we saw was that they have allowed their policies to get ahead of their innovation in Europe, and now they got a mess. Now they're going back to coal after they shut down their nuclear plants and everything else. We should learn an important lesson there, that we not let our policies get ahead of our innovation. Mr. O'Loughlin, I want to ask you, in light of this rule, in light of the rule that we're discussing here today, and many others from EPA, where do you see investments in the power sector going?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult answer for baseload generation. Obviously, the government is incenting more wind and solar, and I think we'll see more of that, which is fine. But the investment, I'd like to expand a little bit on why I'm so confident that we're going to see a lot of closures of coal plants and probably some baseload natural gas. And it's the state of carbon capture systems, which have been demonstrated to be able to capture carbon at some larger scale, but they've never been demonstrated according to the requirements in this EPA proposed rule. They've never captured a full output of a unit of the size and scope of the units that we operate. It's never been required to operate on a continuous basis at a 90% capture rate, and they just simply have not been demonstrated to even be able to do that, let alone to do it at a reasonable cost. So I'm quite confident that many operators of coal plants are not going to be able to just throw money away on this, what I'll call a science experiment, that this might work on a full-scale
Understood.
baseload generating unit.
Thank you. Mr. Snicker, let me ask you, how is it simply proposing this rule, simply proposing it, and subjecting industry to further regulatory uncertainty affect planning and investment? How does a company do that?
The degree of uncertainty that's raised chills investment, quite simply. If you look at the proposal,
Sort of like if the president says we're not going to need fossil fuel in the next 10 years.
well, if you're looking at making a 20 or 30-year investment in infrastructure to a power plant, you're not going to make a 20-year or 30-year investment on a 10-year time horizon. So you elect not to make that investment. The challenge becomes, as we look at this energy expansion, as I noted before, with electrification and increased load, you're going to need more resources, not less. And as the resource mix changes, it's not a one-for-one replacement. If you add 10,000 megawatts of wind or solar, you still need to have 1,000 megawatts or more of natural gas-fired resources in order to back them up when they don't operate. And so they work symbiotically, and they are required to work together.
Let's talk about pipelines for a second, and that's important to me because we just got a letter, the Georgia delegation just got a letter from the Georgia Public Service Commission to the entire delegation telling us how a lack of pipelines is threatening our ability to be competitive. Do you think that's true?
I think the need for infrastructure is clear. If we're going to need to see an expansion of the natural gas system, even if it operates less frequently and at a lower capacity factor, it's going to need to be able to have access to the resources. And right now, there is not sufficient access to those resources, and that creates a problem because if it's not there, it doesn't matter if you build a plant or not.
Is it a financial problem or a reliability problem or both?
It's an all of the above problem.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. Thank you both. Thank all of you for being here. This is extremely important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back.